But if you look at the impact of this budget on the structural funds, on the CAP funds, on small countries, you've mentioned the Baltic states, which can take Greece, you can take Ireland. In Ireland, the transfer made to Ireland, it was for Ireland, given the size of this country, 4 points of GDP every year during 20 years. So it is massive. It's not totally nothing. So we should not forget this. And of course, Ireland used these funds thanks to a very good economic strategy. And then Ireland realized a fantastic first success story to have a development very impressive during the 90s and till the recent crisis. And of course, some other countries, maybe Greece, use these funds less efficiently, let's say. But let's not underestimate the impact of the EU budget, even if globally speaking, it's a very limited one. What I wanted to say, just 2 additional remarks about the social model, the welfare state. This is about Europe in the global economy. If we look at the crisis and the roots of this crisis, we can identify the public expenditure. It's easy to say this. Well, if you look at Ireland and Spain, it's not there's also the problem in Ireland and Spain is private financing, creating a real estate bubble.
My colleague has point. I think it can be extrapolated to more significant things. Let me put it this way. You ask why, for instance, the South of England taxpayer would wish to keep this rottenly obese, constantly money squandering. Absolutely. I've said far more worse about them. But why would we want to keep it? That is an absolutely vital question in all of these discussions, because the part when we talk about the financial crisis that so often gets lost is precisely the thing that got us here in the first place, which is the question of identity and what it is that we are after, what it is we are holding on to. Let me put it like this. Why do we hold on to Scotland? Why do we not say, well, to hell with it? Because we feel that Scotland is part of a union that we are part of. It is us. It's not something, I mean, it's rather like, you choose friends, you've got family. Your family you're born with, you can't do anything about it. And when it comes to people then behaving badly, if my brother spends more money than he has, and it happens repeatedly, would I loan him the money? Again, possibly, because he's my brother. If my third cousin twice removed kept on going out and spending all the money he had getting drunk, I'd be less sympathetic. And this is the problem for Europe. This is Greece to us. I don't mind the fact we have one drunken brother in Scotland, but I don't want a whole extended family of drunks being supported by me. They can go be drunks on their own, and somebody else can pay for it. But I don't feel that one's my responsibility.
I think that's the Germans.
That's how it goes. Well, the Germans are drunk with a whole extended drunk family.
I will only say to this that I have a couple of friends from Scotland, and I will certainly quote you. But can I also recommend you just once more to look at a nice film with Mel Gibson called Braveheart? Okay.
But Braveheart is racist anti-English propaganda made by notorious anti-Semites.
Does anyone have any questions about Scotland from the audience? We should open this up to some questions from the audience.
Yes, they're getting nervous, so we will take some questions.
Please, hands? Anyone? Because we can keep going about Scotland. Alright, how about in lieu of questions, we'll shout them out. What about I want someone to speak about whether the notion, Yves' notion that Europe is shrinking relatively, right? We've got Brazil and China, we have emerging nations, and this is true in the United States as well. There's a sense of fear. But without any political project, without a foreign policy that is feckless at best, what is the, and you also said that Europe has to grow, it has to look test the size, right?
No.
Like UEFA, right? If you want to talk about the Eurovision contest, that extends past the congresses, right? UEFA, the same thing. There are other groupings of European, or whatever you want to call it, proto-European states. But does it have to keep growing? I guess is one question. And two, is it really stronger together?
Well, if you want to go the way that Eve indicates, I would be careful about the white. And I just can't see why it should occupy the neighborhood, if you like, because I don't think the European Union was ever thought of being something of that kind. What I do say is that at the moment we're closing our eye for a lot of opportunities, in particular maybe establishing free trade areas or doing deals and so on and so forth. And I want to say what I always say is I cannot understand why Europe is closing its eyes for the little China of Turkey, a country that grows with 8 to 10% a year.
I'm not sure Turkey wants to be part of the European Union.
I'm not talking about membership. I'm just saying, how can we turn the back so much to a country that has so much now geopolitical, or at least regional influence, but in particular is such an economic miracle. But that's another story. On the issues of, I don't really like the thing about the metastasis because it gives me a wrong association. I think it's something very unpleasant. But I don't think that Europe necessarily should grow beyond the borders now, and maybe it has grown a little bit too much and too fast if it comes to it. My problem is about the stagnating role of the Western world. This whole dilemma is very much linked to democracy for me. And the same thing is in the US. And the only thing that saves the US from going down into this destiny is basically because they're still open for migration. But you also know that the consequence of that is that the Spanish immigrants and the Spanish language and Spanish culture is taken over more and more in the US. But in Europe, we're not very open for that. And I just want to blame something. I want to blame the pharmaceutical industry. Because they gave us the pill that means we can decide whenever we want to have children, and then fertility drops substantially, and they're keeping us old ones alive until we're 90. I mean, that basically changes the whole world. And I'm not in agreement with what Eve said about we just need to adjust the welfare state. I think we need to reform it substantially, and that is going to create a lot of political and social conflict in Europe over the coming years, regardless of the present process, in my opinion.
One of the panaceas that will continue to be offered to Europeans is that the more open our borders are, the more open we allegedly are for those thousands of people from around the world to come, the more we'll be able to get through this problem. It's the same thing with the birth rate question. No, sure. There are a lot of people who say across Europe, basically, for instance, the way to sort out the declining birth rate of Europe is to continually fill up that deficit with migrants. I simply would say about that, when it does come up, that it is very important that people don't see Europe solely as a financial or fiscal body, and that one of the most important things is that European identity is felt, I'm not a closed border person, but is felt to be sustainable by the people within those countries. I think that once effectively you decide that you are the world, then the identity that got you there erodes, and all sorts of problems will come from that. And there are some free marketeers, some very prominent ones across Europe, who seem to think this is a solution. I think it's a solution to a part of the problem, but it causes a different problem somewhere else.
I just have to say, I said the US is doing quite well because they integrate the immigrants. The problem in Europe is that we take the immigrants and we're not being very good at integration. And I'm always saying, if you want to solve this problem, we need to learn how to integrate economically the immigrants. So
we are terrible.
I think, just quickly, I want to talk a little bit more about the European identity. Does it exist? Is it fundamentally opposed to migration? There's certainly that notion that the European states, the social project, was formed by Christian countries acting democratically, at least since World War II. And that we've seen, whether in France or in other places, that there's a feeling that somehow the Muslim immigration, the Islamic immigration from North Africa is somehow incompatible, and there's a tension there. You see from Geert Wilders, to Sarkozy, and across many places. I know this is something you've written about.
I think it shouldn't be discounted, and I think it shouldn't be ignored or poo-pooed away. It is always very easy, as I've observed across Europe, it is always very easy for an elite
that tends to live in a very pleasant bubble, but a bubble nonetheless, to ignore problems that are felt substantially by the working class and those people who used to be the working class who now might be regarded in many cases as a kind of underclass. I think that these issues are felt much more viscerally on the ground than they are at the top of society, and people at the top of society are very, very unwise to ignore that trend. I would just say that on the issue of identity, you know, all identity questions, it's like, you know, what is Georgian identity? What is British identity? What is Danish identity? What is European identity? To an extent, it is simply getting on with it. Endless self-questioning about who you are, who we are, I think will lead to a kind of nervous breakdown. We'll keep on pulling ourselves apart so much we won't know what we are. My own feeling is that there is a very clear European tradition, a very clear European identity. There is a clear European derivation of thought, of philosophy, and of religion as part of that, and should not be ignored.